Hi and welcome to another episode of Straight from the Desk. In this episode we will discover how to achieve different skin tones. This video was requested by my friend and Patreon supporter Patrick Hurtig, and he asked me on how I would approach dark skin, and especially when it comes to smaller figures such as Space Marines or 32 to 28 mil figures. It can be kind of hard because you only have that reduced space to actually get that effect across. So yeah, let's have a look on how we do that. One thing to notice before is if you look at skin tone references, you can see the darker a skin tone gets, the more important are actually the environment colors, because it's kind of hard to actually see something like the color zones or natural skin tone variation, but the dark skin just reflects more of the environment color. So if you look at a very dark skin, you can almost see that sky blue reflection in the upper head area. And the paler we get with the skin, the more important are those color variations from the skin itself. So the rosy cheeks, the 5 o'clock shadow, color variation to the side of the temple. So yeah, let's see how we paint those 3 different heads. So we're going for a very dark black skin tone, from Africa, Ivory Coast, so something really dark on the one end of the scale. Then we have a second hat that will be more like a Latin, South American, a warm skin tone. That is has a bit more yellow and ochre tones in there, kind of to show also the impact of the sun. And yeah, the last one is a kind of typical Space Marine head, so Caucasian flesh tone with more rosiness and a little bit more reds overall. Alright, so let's see how we do that. Hope you liked that video. Thank you for your support. Okay, so here we are with our Space Marine head, and we're working with a Winsor & Newton Series 7 size 1. You can see it's not a brand new brush, but I think it still has a pretty fine tip for that detailed work. Okay, if we have a look at the palette, we can see that we have quite a lot of different tones going on. We said before we want to achieve a natural looking darker skin tone. So a dark brown, but you can see here we have rather bright tones on the palette. So here we have the red rust from Secret Weapon range. Here we have the orange rust, also from Secret Weapon range. Here we have some Tamar Black from P3. Here we have some Hex Legion from the Game Color Air range. Here we have some Games Workshop Mephiston Red. Here we have some Model Color Turquoise. And here we have the Schmincke Titanium White. So for our base tone for the skin, we could also go for a pre-mixed dark brown tone, but as I mentioned before, this here, just to start off with a rather bright orange tone and some black to define your own orange, and maybe a little red or red-brown to the side to push the color in the direction you really want it to be in the end, gives you a huge potential to create your own nice working range of brown tones that really work well together. So we will start using plenty of the orange rust here. And black. And you can see here I'm mixing it gradually on the palette, here with more of the black in the mix, and here with more of the orange rust. So before, this could be a little bit too orange or yellow, so I'm adding a bit of the red rust also to the mix, to all of it here, until I'm happy with the brown tone. More of the red rust here. Yeah, I think that could be a nice range to start with. The really interesting thing is that with like this tone here, if we would just proceed like we would usually do and just, or how I often do, and just highlight it with the pure titanium white, we would really receive like almost Caucasian looking skin tone using like the same tones here. So as you can see here, this here could be just a regular flesh tone. So we can not really just go ahead and highlight it with white as we usually do, but this is like quite an interesting challenge. So let's see how we go about highlighting and working with like a darker skin tone like that. Okay, we're starting here with that very dark brown tone, and we're using it rather opaque in the beginning, so it's something like a medium base tone consistency. Okay, we'll let that dry. But already at that stage you can see actually quite nice where the highlights are captured. So we're going to place them in like the same manner. So these areas here where you have elements that are more exposed towards the sun, they will get definitely like a little bit of highlight. As mentioned in the introduction, actually the darker a skin tone gets, the more it picks up the environment light. And we cannot just go ahead and just pick a white to highlight our base tone, because that would, first it would turn the figure quite pale, plus we wouldn't get the same like somewhat realistic look. So let's see what we do first. We will first, like we started here in the transition with our base tone, but we will pick a little bit the slightly more orange tone here to proceed and introduce like the first highlight. We will work with about the same consistency, maybe a bit thinner than before. So we're working now with like a light base tone consistency, and we're first adding that slightly warmer tone here on the more raised areas. By adding more water here, and now working more with like a heavy layer. For the white of the eyes, we're going to take like a little bit of the darker tone here from the back and just add a bit of white. We're not going for like a super white of the eye, because that would just definitely pop out a little bit too much. And we can use the same kind of like gray beige tone first to paint like the white of the eye. And we're going a bit overboard with the eyes to make sure that we really hit all of the eyeball, and we're correcting the outlines later on. We can use the same off-white here also for the deep. Same here, if we would just go ahead and paint them in pure white, that would just be way too bright. Okay, and our darker base tone, we can correct the eyelids. And we'll continue, and as mentioned in the beginning, for the highlight we want to have like a little bit more color variation than just using the pure white, and therefore I've added a little bit of the turquoise, and we'll also add like a tiny bit of the black, not too much, just not to have it too intense in tone. But we're creating like a blue-gray tone here as a highlight color, to indicate that the darker skin just reflects more of the environment. And we imagine that Space Marine standing outside. So we're working with a little bit of like a blue that could indicate the sky. And we're using that here together with the orange end of our transition here to create like the first bluish highlight tone, and that gives us a very interesting color variation. I'm just trying to place in like the maximum highlights. Now just with a darker mixed tone, we're working our way down again. Working more with the glaze. But we definitely want to make sure that we don't end up being way too bright here, because the definition of the dark skin really happens also with the shadows, and only a little bit with the light, and that's just something to keep in mind. and to the forehead and also the nose, where we have like the maximum impact of our highlight, we will just add some of that light blue-gray, and you can see it's actually quite surprising how bright it appears, because we have that darker color around. We're also creating like a very thin glaze from the tone to work our way down here from the maximum highlight. I already really like actually the range of tones that we have created, and we still are completely lacking actually the shadow color and the color variation that comes with that. So in this step now we're just continuing and refining our highlights so they really look nice and smooth, and we're doing that with different glazes here of these different shades between the lighter blue-gray highlights and our base flesh tone. Okay, so I think for the highlights for now it looks good, and we definitely have to detail the eyes out a little bit more, so we're doing that just with a bit of pure black here. Wiping off the brush a little. Okay, I'm trying to correct the eyes a little bit. And with a little bit of that not too blue highlight tone, but just slightly brighter than the base tone, we can paint the eyelids. And correct if we spilled the pupil color a little bit. So yeah, so far so good. For the shadow work, we will take some of that Hex Legion here from Game Color Air Range, and you can see how dark it appears when it's just a dot of paint, but when we spread it out on the paper, it appears quite a bit more purple. So I'm adding a bit of black here because I don't want it to be that visibly purple. And I'm also adding a bit of the Mephiston red to get like more like a scarlet shade here. Okay. And we're using this here. This one is a heavy glaze. We're first starting to introduce it here to the cheeks. And with a clean brush, we're pushing it back a little. And also here, just with that thinner glaze on the brush, glaze to the temple area. And what we cannot really do is we cannot really introduce like that typical color zone element here, because if we would just add like a rosy tone here to the cheeks of the nose, that would just look off. So we're trying to get like that warmth here more with like our shadow tone. But as mentioned before, here, even in that scale, like the environment colors and the reflections are more important than the variation of the skin itself. Okay, for the lips we will add more of the red rust here, together with black. So we have to be careful that we're not painting our lips too red. Being subtle here is really super important. In general, when it comes here to these color variations, you don't want those to be like too cartoony. Alright, I think it already looks pretty nice for our dark skin tone so far. We will add some highlights on our hair to see how it looks in general, and then also add a little bit of highlight work here to the surrounding elements to see what we need definition wise. Okay, for the hair we will just take some of our black and highlight it here with our bluish gray. And we are carefully stippling that in to create a little bit of texture here. Going a bit brighter. I'm trying to do small dots of about the same size. If we create larger ones and smaller ones, it's also not all that bad, but you can just go back with like a different shade and try to equal them out a bit. Okay, we'll continue also with like more on the shadow areas, but I think you got where this is going, and I can just do that off cam. We'll be back to detail out some of these surrounding elements. Alright. Okay, so you can see I continued here with the texture on the hair, but I think it turned out a little bit too bright overall, so we have to make sure that it doesn't appear gray. I think on this side it worked quite well, but just here on the top I think it turned out a little bit too bright. So what we'll do is we'll just take some of the black here and mix it with our base hair tone, so we get like a color that is almost black. Thin that down using water from the cup, so we get like between medium and light glaze consistency, and we'll use that and just carefully glaze over the texture that we created. We don't want to lose it all, but we just want to tint it down a little bit. Also using it here in the separation area because it's almost black, and we can just use that here to define the outline again a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so I said the next thing is we will add a little bit of color here to the surrounding elements just to get a feeling of if the contrast in the face is alright. And we will do that with the colors that we have already on the palette. So we're introducing like slightly stronger, so cooler tones here, like a cool blue as a base tone here for this part here. We're doing that so we create like a stronger contrast to the warm skin tones, and this way our skin just appears also a little bit more contrasting. Adding a bit of pure white here. Not too much color on the brush, so I just cleaned the brush, adding just a bit of the blue here. Some white to the tip. And a second time I'm using a bit more white here. Okay, and with the light blue-gray mixed tone that I mixed on the palette, and just soften out the transition to the top. For these elements here to the side, I just want to add like a small but intense highlight in that blue-gray that we've used here also for the hair. So I imagine that to be like a black material, just a little bit of highlight. Or less than, definitely less than that middle part here. Okay, adding a tiny bit more white here. Okay. Okay, I like that. Alright, I like the look of that, and I think we might just want to push our shadows a little bit more. So, working here again with our purple. And I think also not to lose like the intensity of the highlight here. I also want to push that a little bit, so I'm using some of our base tone here together with the highlight color. Carefully adding that here close to our main highlight. I think that's quite a bit better. Alright, so this here concludes the super dark skin tone. We'll continue with a lighter, so, let's say a little bit more like a Latino skin, so a little bit more on the yellow ochre side. We'll continue with that, and we'll be back with the next head in place. Alright. Okay, as you can see, we have the second head ready in place to be painted, and we still have the same palette on than before, and this is because I would like to demonstrate like actually how little difference there is and what in like what colors we add to the mix, but what big influence it has on the finished model. So we will take actually some of that same base tone that we've been using previously, and you can see here to the back of the palette I've added some yellow oxide from the Chimera color range. We'll add a little bit of that here. Still a bit more of the original base tone. And you can see we created a shade that is quite a bit more yellow than before. And let's just add a bit of white here to the side to see how it is intensity wise when we highlight it just with the pure white. And I think you can see that we need a little bit more red in there. I think this is actually quite a good tone. Maybe a bit more yellow. I think that should be a decent tone to start with. And we're again starting with a medium base tone consistency. And we're applying that all over the head, including also actually the eye area. We're not going really into the mouth itself, because that should remain like quite a dark area afterwards. Okay, and we'll continue with a second layer once the first is completely dry. Okay, so this is how the head looks with just the base color in place, and we'll continue using some of our base color that we've just mixed and add a bit of white here. As we're going for a brighter shade of skin tone in general than with the super dark skin before. We're not adding any of the blue here because the impact of the environmental colors wouldn't be visible all that much. And due to the scale, we cannot really get like a finer gradient than adding a tiny bit of blue or no blue at all. But we're continuing here first with the main highlight and then going smaller and smaller with our highlights. And with a bit of the base tone, we can create like an intermediate shade. Continuing again with the slightly brighter shade here for these prominent features like the nose and the nostrils. Adding a bit more white, also a tiny bit more of the yellow ochre. Or yellow oxide, sorry. A little bit more of the yellow oxide. And some white. Going slightly darker again as we're moving more downwards on the forehead. Well, the important thing is that we don't end up with a highlight that looks too pale, so that's the reason why I've added a bit more of the yellow oxide as well. Okay, I like that look for the highlights already, and we definitely need to get a tone in to define our deepest shadows and the areas of strongest contrast. But you can already see that the definition here with these stronger, brighter and darker highlights is already surprisingly strong compared to the black skin. Okay, we'll continue with that red, rust and black here. And this defines our maximum shadow color here, and we will use that first to outline the eyeballs. And also the lower side of the nose here. And then again, with our base tone, we can correct here the lower eyelid, and also like where we went slightly over the edge. It's okay to have the shadow color here in the darker area, like under the eyebrows, but you don't want to have any visible lines. Okay, continuing here with that same tone, but mixed together with our base tone. Okay, have like a slightly lighter shadow tone, and we're using that also here. There's like a tiny scar here. And we're continuing here, refining things a little with our base tone, or with our first highlight tone. And we're continuing here with that brighter highlight shaded. It's used up a little, so we have to remix it here. But we're continuing here with the brighter shade of our highlight for elements like the eyes and the teeth. I'm retouching things here a little in the shadow area. adding the pupil here. It's the iris, to be fair. So okay, the eyes appear quite big now, but I like the direction of where they're looking. But we're taking some for a base tone here to re-establish that lower eyelid and to small the eyes a little. And we're continuing here with the eyelid color. I'm trying to go in here into the highlights of the eyelids again, because I think they just killed a little the separation line between the eye and the highlight here, and I want to have like really a better definition here. Yeah, I think that looks better. I'm using like a slightly darker, slightly more reddish tone here. To create some stronger shadows. We're adding a bit more red here. It's actually the red rust to the side, and we're working with a glaze to get like a bit more of a red impact. Not too much. And you can see we were really working with a very thin glaze, just to not stain the figure too much. For these larger surface glazes here, and you can use it slightly more opaque here for these more defined shorter shadows. Okay, here we have these metal studs. We'll just also outline them here first with that dark red tone. I also want to add like a dark brown color to the hair. We're not going for black hair, this time we're going for brown hair. And as we incorporated also some of the previous skin color base tone as our base tone for our current skin, we're just using this here, and it should really nicely work together with like that dark brown as a fitting base tone for the hair here. We really have to make sure that we don't leave like a black outlining here around the hair, otherwise this would really end up looking like Playmobil hair, just like a sticked-on plastic part. So sometimes outlines are very important to like separate areas, but here we don't want the separation to be all that strong, and we have to like incorporate a little bit more of our skin tone here to like indicate also like a shadow of the hair here. And we'll do that now, just mixing the color that we have for the hair with like the color that we've been using as a base tone for the skin. Dim that down a little here. And use that here to the side of the skull to indicate like a slightly darker, grayer area for like some hair shadow. Let that dry. And we'll continue with the same tone and add just tiny dots here. A bit more here in the shadow area. Okay, and I still want to increase a little bit more of like a redder tone. I'm mixing some of the red rust with a tiny bit of the Mephiston red. And I'm thinning that down with water from the back of the brush. I want to get that on the cheeks, but not as strong as with the Caucasian flesh tones later on. Adding a bit of the highlight tone here from the skin. And we're adding that here between that red color variation and our highlight, but we want to make sure that we don't end up with a tone that is too rosy. Okay. Let me pull it a little bit closer to see what areas need more definition. and we'll be back to add some details here to the face. Okay, alright. I've placed both heads next to each other to see also how they look in comparison, and I think it's really fantastic actually to see them, both of them next to each other. It gives us quite a good feeling if the overall contrast works, and I think it's actually quite good. Both could need just a little bit more, I think, definition in the shadow area, but definitely here I think on our more Latin skin tone we will try to do that. We're pushing a little bit the reds in the shadows still. We will do that this time here with some of the pure red rust from Secret Weapon. Oh, looks like there was still like a little bit of color from before in my brush, so I just made like another spot here, making sure it's just the pure red rust. And you can see I'm trying to pull the brush and the pigments a little to the lower side so they gather more in the shadow area. So a little bit here to the side, not too much. And sometimes in miniatures it's really like a thin line between overdoing something as intended exaggeration or still trying to be subtle. So this is really a thin line, but I think I still want to push that the orangeness of the tone of the skin tone a little. I'm creating here like a mixed tone from the yellow oxide, the red rust, and some of the orange rust. And we're working with a very thin glaze here. And carefully glazing that here on the mid-tone areas, but you can see the impact is really little. The look of that. And for our black skin tone, I think I want to push the shadows, as I said, a little bit more. We're doing that here with a bit more black, a bit more red here to the Hex Legion. Also careful not to stain the figure and also not to get like a shadow that is too intense. But yeah, I think this way also both heads work really nice together, contrast wise, and you could imagine them standing somewhere together. Right. We will also continue here, adding some of the other details, same as the metal studs here. think we can do that because it's directly in the face still together. Taking a bit of that dark blue-gray. Adding a small dot to the lower side. And continuing with some pure white. And we're adding just a small dot to the top. Okay, we'll continue with the other small elements and we'll be back to compare the two heads and then move on to the third one. Alright. Okay, so just before we start with the third head, here are the two heads together just on a black base to be able to compare the colors nicely without like the wood grain and the stains. So I've added like these tiny elements, same colors then on the dark head, and I think it's really nice to see how the two skin tones work together, and how also now that when we fixed the shadow and highlight contrast here, that both actually appear very nicely together, as if they would be standing under the same light. Also the I think the hair tones work really nicely together with the skin tones, and yeah, let's get the third head in place with the like the Caucasian flesh tone. Okay, so this is the Space Marine head that I've decided to take for the Caucasian flesh tone. Like white skin tone is like the average that we see with Space Marines, so I thought like, okay, we have two of these typical screaming heads in like a not so average skin tone, and you were going for a whiter skin tone. We don't have like that screaming face with like these prominent wrinkles also on the nose. We have that little face mask, and we also don't have hair. But just to see how we get, like using the same colors, how we get like a nice Caucasian skin tone. So if you remember just from the very beginning of the painting process, I said like if we would just add pure white to our base tone, we would get like a somewhat Caucasian flesh tone, and that was not what we want to achieve on the first head. I just left that bit here rather untouched from just the mixing process. So I think this is quite a nice tone. Still, I want to add like a little bit of the base tone of the black skin here, and maybe a tiny bit more of the red rust. That was actually a little bit too much. Yeah, I think that could be a nice base tone for us. And we're working again with a medium base tone consistency, so we cover the surface with 1 or 2 layers. Okay, and as this is really all the same, I will just finish off the base color off cam. I will be back to continue with our highlights. Alright. Okay, this is how the figure looks with the base color established, and we'll continue with our highlight tone, and we'll add white to our base color here. Back here we're creating like a darker shade, and here to the front we're gradually adding a bit more white. We're starting with that bright shade here. here to the top of the forehead, I'm introducing that sphere-like highlight here to the front. And because if we look at the head from the direction of this, the light source, you can see that it goes a little bit more like thinner to the back. So this is also the same shape that our highlight needs to have. So continuing with a slightly darker paint here to the side. Okay, increasing the contrast a bit. Feathering out the paint a bit. And going a bit brighter. And same as with the other heads, we're working a bit back and forth now at this step here to soften things out. Using glazes between our strongest highlight tone and the base color that we started with. I think you got where this is going, and because we have so little of the face that we actually see because of the larger amount of the face mask, we have to also really pay attention here to these tiny wrinkles, because the less we see here of an important part like the head, the more important it gets. So yeah, we will still glaze out the highlights a little bit before we're back to detail out the eyes. Alright, I think we're good to go to add some detailing to the eyes and the eyelids. We will do that, since we did with that before, we will do that with a dark red brown, and we're using a combination of black and some of the Secret Weapon red rust. I'm also adding it here. And with a bit of water, we are thinning that down. We're introducing that a little more as a glaze, as an outline towards the face mask element. And we're continuing here with our highlight color from before, about the same intensity. That went a little over the lid, so I think I want to correct that in a second. The color seems to be a bit too thin actually. So let's get back. The dark red brown here. We're using a bit more of the thicker white from the top of the dot of paint here to mix like about the same kind of highlight tone I've been using previously, but in a thicker consistency. This way we should have a little bit more control when we place in the eyes here. Okay, and going a bit darker again. Okay, and going a bit darker again. For the eyelids. And using some black. So I want to push the highlights on the eyelids a bit more, so they're a little bit better visible. Okay, and we're continuing with first some general shadow work, and we're doing that also with the color that we've been using on the previous head, so the mixed tone of black and some of the red rust as a glaze. We're starting to apply that very, very carefully. First in the areas of strongest shadow, so under the cheeks and here to the side of the temple area. Not too much. Okay, and we're using here that mixed tone of the red rust and a tiny bit of the Mephiston red that was in there, and we're also pushing the red here on the cheeks a bit more. Also with these additions we have to be careful, we don't want him to look too cartoony or too much like Drunken Santa Claus. So also these additions here of color need to be done really rather careful. Glazing, a very light glaze here of the red, a little here to the side. Okay, I like the direction of the skin tone. Let me just add the two heads next to each other, or let me just add the two additional heads so we can compare the three together and how they work from their contrast altogether. Alright. Okay, so this is how our three skin tones look compared next to each other, and I like really how subtle the differences are. Like, I mean, this here compared to that is quite strong, but I think like they don't look like overly cartoony. But I think this head here needs just a little bit more play of color to really work together with the other two. So we'll continue here with our red rust as a glaze and introduce that a little bit here stronger to the side. Okay, we have to be careful that it's not too much. It's a little bit too much of the glaze here on the surface. So I'm trying to push it back into the shadow area. Okay, that was definitely a little bit too much. So adding a little bit here. Definitely less than before. So let me get the other two a little bit further away so we can do the correction works here. Alright. Okay, so we're jumping back to our base tone that we've started with on our Caucasian head and thinning that down a bit to solve that issue here. And we're just applying a very thin glaze of that base tone, and it should already help us to reduce that impact here. Detail a bit brighter here. Okay, better. And continuing here, defining some of those wrinkles here a bit stronger. Also, we don't want to overdo this step, but I just want to have like a little bit more definition here towards the shadow side. And we're pushing also on our color variation a bit more, using actually a pink. We've been avoiding that pink on the other faces, but here in that red color zone we want to have a little bit of pink, so I'm mixing some of the Mephiston red with plenty of white. And also some of our base tone. Okay, I think that should be good. And we'll be introducing the pink here in that area where the highlight and the red color variation of the cheek meet. Added a bit more red. But as said before, here with these additions we have to also be kind of careful, so really just a tiny bit. Okay, let's add a little bit of highlight work here to that metal stud, just to see how it looks with like more contrast going on. Pure white dot on the top. That also changes how we perceive like the overall brightness here of our highlight, because once the white is in there, our dominant highlight on the forehead doesn't look all that strong as well. I will continue quickly adding a highlight here to that face mask, and then continue with some of the details off cam. But here we will also use like that mixture of turquoise and black. We'll continue here with our highlight tone, so that it's white and a little bit more of the turquoise. I really like that shape of the mask actually. I've never noticed it before, just when I was looking for the heads for the video here. I realized that these here have actually, like, this box has fantastic new heads, and I really like some of the new designs for the details here of the face mask, and also some of the helmet details. Continue going a bit brighter. a small brighter white dot that is just minimally softened out here. Okay, I like the look of that. Also now I think contrast wise it looks really good. I think I will just finish off the helmet details here and we'll be back to add a little bit of hair stubble. Alright. Okay, so here we are with just the Caucasian head separately again on that wood block, and we'll continue with like a little bit of fine detail work that we still wanted to add. So like a hair shadow here to the side, and I think some eyebrows and maybe a bit stronger, like a pink color variation again, pushing that a little on the cheeks. But yeah, let's start with that. You can see the old palette dried out and we've refreshed. The palette having the same colors going on than before. So here we have some Secret Weapon Red Rust. Here we have some Secret Weapon Orange Rust. Here we have some Tamar Black from P3. Up here we have some Hex Legion Purple from the Modern Color Air range. Up here we have some Chimera Color Yellow Oxide. Here we have some Citadel Mephiston Red. Here we have some Model Color Turquoise. And here we have some of the Schmincke Titanium White. Okay, we need to remix kind of like similar base tone than we had previously on the palette. So we definitely need to have that black brown that we started with. I think that should be good. And for our base tone for the Caucasian flesh, we just took the darker color here and added a bit more. Of both the red rust and also the orange rust. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Let's see how it looks. Let's bring it up a bit. Should be somewhat similar. Alright, so we will start with that darker tone here and add a bit more black because we want to get like a color for the hair shadow. And we're thinning that down to a glaze consistency. And yeah, I think this is quite good. It's like between medium and light glaze consistency. And we can take that here to apply like a glaze where we want it to look like there has actually been growing hair and then not that he's like naturally bald. So we'll do that first with like a rather thin glaze. And I already like the look of that. I think we just need to push it a little bit stronger. You can see I'm really trying to push the pigments again here more to the lower side, so they really gather here a little bit stronger in the shadow area. But all these glazes are really thin so they don't stain the surface. Okay, I'll let that dry, and while it dries I'm taking some of that tone here from the palette in a thicker consistency than before. So let's see, we're between medium and light layer consistency here. And I'm trying to make small dots here. Okay, and we're using here, especially in the area of the highlight, we're doing the same approach with dotting the color here, but this time we're using more like a highlight tone for it. We're going a bit brighter here, adding more white to the mix. With that brighter tone, we can continue here our highlight also in that stippled manner, because we want to have like this here is just really like a thin hair shadow, and it is necessary that the highlight is continued here to the side. Okay, I generally like the look, but I think this, like the dotting texture here in the back, turned out a bit too dominant. So I'm just taking some of that darker base tone here, thinning it down. So between heavy and medium glaze consistency, and I'm using that here to just glaze carefully over the shadow areas again, so the texture vanishes a bit. Yeah, I think now I like the look. Okay, with that really dark end here of our flesh tone, we can take that and maybe add a little bit of the brown here as a color for the eyebrows. And with the eyebrows, we really have to be careful that it's that they're not too strong, but I think because he has like quite a large brow volume here, it would be good to add eyebrows. As I said before, I want to push also the red bit. So we're creating like a very thin red glaze, mixed from the Mephiston red and a bit of the skin tone. we're using this here is a light glaze consistency. Red is always like quite a dominant color, and even if the pigments on the palette seem to be not really intense, once you place it on like a lighter surface, like here on the cheeks for example, you can really see the red. So make sure you work with really like a thin glaze. I think that is already enough. Maybe a little bit here around that metal stud. Alright, so I really like the look of that. So let's get the other two heads in place so we can see how all of the three look together and if we need some final adjustment. Alright, so this is how the three heads look together, and I really like that subtle difference in skin tones that we achieved from like that super black dark skin over like something more like Latin skin to a Caucasian flesh tone. And I think it's quite interesting to see that we achieved the look with like using the same colors just in a different mixture. And yeah, hope you like that tutorial and hope to see a lot of diverse Space Marines and other miniatures from you. Okay.